All right, Alexander, let's talk about what is happening with Syria. It looks like we're getting very, very close to a solution to the conflict in Syria. Of course, we have the US troops in the northeast of Syria. That's going to get resolved, I imagine, later at a later date. But we now have Saudi Arabia in discussions with the Syrian government. Assad being let back into the Arab League as well, and just a lot of diplomacy taking place over the past couple of weeks to normalize the relations between Syria and every country in the region, to
Yeah.
be quite honest.
Yes.
But I guess it
Yes.
starts with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the key in
Yes.
all of this normalization.
It's the pivotal country because it was the Saudis who, alongside Turkey, came together with the US to try to overthrow Assad back in 2011, 2012. And the Saudis, like the Turks, have now decided that Assad is there to stay, and they're prepared to, make up with him. And Saudi Arabia has just hosted the Syrian foreign minister. He's visited Saudi Arabia, so that's effectively the resumption of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Syria. Syria is about to rejoin the Arab League, and there's also talk about a full-power meeting, probably in Moscow, of foreign ministers, Syrian, Turkish, Iranian, and Russian, basically to iron out the remaining differences between Syria and Turkey, with Assad playing a tough game with Erdogan, but it seems that we will be getting an Erdogan-Assad summit. I mean, it's still on the cards. It's definitely on the cards. It will definitely happen. But Saudi Arabia now wants to patch up with Syria. Turkey wants to patch up with Syria. Everybody does. The only people who are still wanting to pursue regime change in Syria are the Americans and their British friends.
Yeah. So what do the Americans and their British friends do? What's their next step?
Well, I'm going to say this. I think their next step is to try to make sure that Erdogan loses the Turkish elections. I mean, that's their major focus at the moment. And Erdogan has already been complaining about this. The trouble the US has is that the end of the war in Syria is a popular policy in Turkey. And all the Turkish parties, as far as I could see, are united in wanting it. So they might not be able to achieve a change in Turkish policy, the Turkish policy of seeking rapprochement with Syria, even if Erdogan loses, which I still don't think he will, by the way. But that's, I think, their immediate priority. The rest is, again, I don't get the sense that they have much of a plan B. Milley went to see the US troops in eastern Syria some weeks ago. I think they're going to try and cling on as long as they can and hope that something turns up that they can use to turn the situation in Syria. Or maybe there's some further plan involving an attack on Iran. I don't know. But it doesn't look as if they have any clearly thought through plan.
Well, CIA Director Burns was in Riyadh on a secret trip, which CNN reported on. CNN always reports on the CIA's secret trips.
I know.
But Burns, it sounds to me like Burns gave the Saudis a warning.
Yes.
About not only about Iran, but I imagine he also warned them about Syria.
Well, he did warn them about Syria. He said that he said that the US was very frustrated by Saudi Arabia's change of position on not just Iran, but also in Syria as well. And we see what the Saudi response is. They've just welcomed the Syrian foreign minister.
How much of this this diplomatic these negotiations and this diplomacy, how much of it do you think is falling into the hands of China? How much involvement do you think the Chinese are putting into this? Because it looks like, I mean, Russia definitely has the lead in this. But do you think the Chinese are involved in any way?
I think the two countries, China and Russia, work together. But I think ultimately it's the Chinese that are playing the biggest role, because it's the Chinese who brokered the biggest breakthrough of all, which was getting Iran and Saudi Arabia on the same page. Now that was the main challenge. That was the most difficult thing, and the Chinese did it. So they can leave the Russians to take care of the rest, but they're obviously there in the background.
If they solve Syria, and then they also solve Yemen, because we also have the Saudis talking with the government, the Houthis, and the situation in Yemen. I mean, these are huge diplomatic wins for the Chinese and the Russians, and these are huge diplomatic losses for the Biden White House. Yes,
it's the end of that whole policy that was initiated way back in the early 2000s and which continued through the so-called Arab Spring to remake the Middle East. What's happened instead is that the Middle East, all the major leaders are still there, apart from Saddam Hussein, of course, but all the major leaders are still there, all the major governments are still there, except that they've all turned their backs on the United States.
Yeah. Tunisia is saying that they're going to enter BRICS now because they have some issues with the IMF. Egypt is interested in BRICS. I mean, everything is shifting, and it's shifting very, very quickly. And again, the Biden White House just seems disinterested. The CIA is interested. Burns is interested.
Yes.
But Biden, Sullivan, Blinken, they're not interested.
Yes.
They're lecturing Saudi Arabia about woke stuff and things like this. They've fallen back on the ideology, the woke agenda, and they're not really interested in finding a way to get back in the game, I guess, in the Middle East.
I think that's entirely correct.
They've given it up.
I think they're giving it up. Well, I don't know that they've given it up, but anyway,
they have Blinken, Sullivan. I'm saying, like those guys. I'm not saying.
I mean, they're so focused on the one issue of Ukraine at the moment that they are not really considering any more the Middle East. They've let the Middle East go, and given how important the Middle East has been for US policy ever since the 1960s, that is astonishing.
Yeah. I guess a final thought is, I guess the thinking of the Biden White House at this point, I would imagine, if they have a plan, I guess it's, let's just destroy Russia and destroy China, and the Middle East will have nowhere else to go but to get back on side with us. I guess that's their ultimate plan. If they have a plan.
I think that is exactly right. I think at the moment, as I said, all of the emphasis is on Russia and on Ukraine, but specifically on Russia, and everything else is being relegated is being put down into a sort of bottom drawer. So the Middle East is being left to take care of itself, which it is doing. Notice that we're seeing a reduction of war across the Middle East. When the US is active in the Middle East, there's more war. When it is less active, there is less war.
Very true. All right, we will leave it there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Rockfin, Odyssey, BitChute, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.